All right, Ralph, good to see you, man. Thanks for coming on. All right, the media is wrong about a lot of things all the time. We come to these events, narratives are created. I'd like you to give me a guess at what you think we are wrong about this year in the SEC.
Oh, okay. No, I think I got a good one because I've been workshopping this take for a while. I think that we are underrating LSU. I think that we have been kind of on a wrong streak with LSU the last few years. I think that they set some higher, they were perceived as exceeding expectations in year one, right? Because they beat Alabama. And then it sets them up for very high expectations that they weren't ready for in year two under Brian Kelly. So now I think that after 3 pretty good years of recruiting, 3 straight top 10 classes, when Kelly says, hey, we have a deeper team, I kind of believe him. And I believe his idea of, hey, you can't be patching holes in the portal. You need to sort of use that as topping off the tank, as he put it. And I think LSU's in better position. So I think the thing that we're going to be wrong about is the difference between LSU and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is the team with a lot of hype, the great transfer portal class. My sense is October 12th, those two teams meet in Baton Rouge. That's probably a swing game that sends the winner off to playoff contention while the loser has to regroup.
Do you think those two teams are competing for a spot in the SEC championship game on that level of a tier? Or do you think it's more, like you said, like maybe they're 3, 4, 5 and they're competing for a playoff spot?
So I was talking about this with Cole Kublik and Greg McElroy. Greg seems to think there are 9 teams that can play in the SEC championship game. And, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but I don't think you're making huge jumps to come up with about 8 or 9 teams that you could kind of conceivably make a case for. My sense is that Ole Miss and LSU are in the second tier. You have your Georgia, Texas. The problem is, I think the obvious part of that tier is Alabama. It would normally be the obvious part of that tier. And I think there's some hesitation by me and others on whether Alabama with a new coach should be at that tier. That next tier, I think a lot of people are comfortable saying, oh, it's Ole Miss, and then maybe list a couple more. I think LSU is in the Ole Miss tier. So I don't know if that really directly answers your question. I think they both could be contenders to get to the SEC championship game, but I don't necessarily view them in the very top tier along with Georgia and Texas.
No, I agree. I'd put Missouri and Tennessee right there with LSU and Ole Miss and put them in a group, and that's kind of how I would look at it. Since you cover the sport nationally and you kind of get to parachute into an event like this and kind of see the coaches, now you covered the game a long time, but what is sort of different about SEC coaches in this conference relative to your experiences with other coaches in other conferences?
So I think the SEC in general, and again, we're talking very, very general because I just got out of, a session with Eli Drinkwitz, and he's definitely a pretty open personality. You can see that Eli makes an effort to show his personality. I think Eli understands the program he's at. I think it's also part of his nature to show his personality. I do think SEC coaches, in a profession that tends to be very guarded, I think SEC coaches are among the most guarded because the hyper-competitiveness of the conference, I think, leads them all to be a little bit like, you know what, we have to mind our P's and Q's here. There's also an element that relates to media coverage, quite frankly. I think SEC coaches are used to sort of being in the spotlight, very intense scrutiny, so I think that they tend to learn to be careful about what they say.
All right, championship pick. Who you got on your ballot?
All right, I'm gonna go very kind of bland here and go Georgia and Texas, with Georgia winning the conference. I do think that Kirby's in a good. I'm far less confident with Texas. I do think Kirby's in a great situation here because he has both the loaded roster and the coaching continuity that a lot of other. That combination I don't think exists with the rest of the league. I can pick holes where the rest of the league is missing a little of one or the other, whereas Georgia, especially coming off of last year's disappointment not making the playoff, I think should be loaded to be a cut above, even in a great conference as good as it is this year.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.